I've been to a lot of places, met a lot of people of different races and cultures. But it's one thing that's been obvious to me. There is no group of people on this earth that are more unique or resilient as the people from my city. That's why I have decided to become a vessel for the people of Franklin, Louisiana, to share their stories with the world. Franklin Tells. Welcome back to another episode of It Is What It Is TV, Franklin Tells edition. I have a very special guest today. I know I say that a lot, but I really mean it this time. I have a very special guest, and I'm gonna let you go ahead and introduce yourself. Go ahead for it.
My name is Sabria Hill McGuire. The McGuire part of my name didn't come up till later in life. My husband and I both were workaholics, and it was late in both of our lives before we got married. I'm originally from Verdonville. I graduated from Centerville High School in 1977. After graduating, I moved to the Lafayette area where there was more opportunities for jobs. I went to work for an attorney. My roommate, she worked for the St. Martin Parish Sheriff's Office. Her boyfriend worked for the St. Martin Parish Sheriff's Office, and he was a canine officer. And I really got excited when they would come home and talk about their job. So I thought that was something in the direction I would like to move in. So I went to work at St. Martin Sheriff's Office. I worked there for 3 years. I really wanted to go into the enforcement part. I worked in the office then. Well, back in the 70s, it was kind of unseen of a woman working on the road or in the jail. So I started applying in St. Mary Parish because I wanted to come back home. I missed my family. I applied at the St. Mary Sheriff's Office, and I'll never forget the interview that I had. The lady told me, "Oh no, you're too little. You cannot be on the road, you can't be in the jail." So I applied at the Franklin Police Department. There was a young chief that was from Franklin, came from Monroe, and he believed in putting women on the road in investigation, David Knockin, who later became sheriff, and he hired me. I worked a very short time as a dispatcher, then I moved to juvenile officer, later on through the road as a lieutenant, then into investigation, and that's pretty much when crack cocaine hit, so there wasn't many females within the state of Louisiana, so I started working a lot of UC work, undercover work for different agencies. And later on, in 1990, I went to the St. Mary Parish Sheriff's Office and ran the drug task force there for 4 years. Of course, I was getting burnt out on working narcotics. I couldn't work undercover in most places because I had worked everywhere, all over Louisiana, all the way to Dade County, Florida. So I applied for the police chief's job when it came open. And I was the only woman out of several applicants. I passed the test and was hired as the police chief. So that was from 1997 until I retired in 2018.
So that was 1997 when you first...
When I became police chief.
Okay.
I worked for Franklin Police Department from 1982 until 1990. I went to the sheriff's office 1990 to 1994. Went back to Franklin Police Department with the idea that I would be the next police chief. The chief was retiring, Chief Henry Louvier, and at his retirement, I took over as chief in '97.
Okay, so tell me this: how did the reality of undercover work differ from what you expected going in?
I knew that it was something that you had to be very careful with, but I think it was easy. It was like acting. If every situation was different, I never really bought street level dope. It was always like ounces and kilos. It was an adrenaline high when you were doing it, but then after it was over with and you sit down and decompressed, all of those fears of what could have happened would happen. And I didn't have that thought. I just thought, okay, I can do this, I'll be fine, until after I worked some really big cases and knew, after people had taken out hits on my life, and I feared for what my family. I didn't think it would be like what you saw on TV, but in certain reality it was that you had to be careful because the person didn't want you to testify that you bought this huge amount of drugs from them. So you always had to watch your surroundings. I couldn't even go to the store without watching my surroundings when I worked deep cover through the late 80s and the early 90s.
How did you find out that you had like a hit on your a hit out on you?
On working federal cases and some of the state cases, they would receive intel in the same ways that they would receive intel that this person is who is selling this large amount of drugs. The same information would come in and they would get that information. My house was shot up at least once on a bad situation. It was a bad situation for me, but it was a big case. And so you just always had to watch your surroundings. Like my house in Verdonville, I had a fence. I've always loved animals. And at nighttime, I would pull into my fence and close the gate. So my house was surrounded by a fence, and my dogs were outside at nighttime and in the house, so I felt safe. You just had to always look over your shoulder. I was in Walmart one time in Bayou Vista, and a guy that was from out of state that he shouldn't even been here on a case I worked, tapped me on the shoulder, and my mother was with me, and I kind of blew my mom off, and we, walked away, and then I walked back and said, don't approach me. I have my, a family member with me. And then we didn't always have cell phones. So when I could get to a phone, I did call my case agent and told him what was going on.
All right. Well, without getting into too much detail, did you have a general idea who shot your house up that time?
I did.
Okay.
I did. It was never proven. I had a general idea who wouldn't have fired the shots, but he would have paid someone or had someone fire the shots.
Okay.
He didn't have to do his dirty work.
Gotcha. So let's get into the training and preparation of working undercover. What does that detail?
Oh, a ton of training, a ton of education. I went to several undercover schools. I went to school at the University of North Florida for a lot of schools, FBI schools, DEA. They don't just give you money, mic you up, and just throw you on the streets. Not back then. Back then they made sure you had the education and knowledge. And I worked several times with a male agent while he was undercover, so I could learn. posing as his girlfriend, posing as his wife, posing as his posing as their mistress, just different agents. And so I would learn the ins and outs before I actually went out on my own.
All right, so you just said that you could pose as someone's girlfriend. A little more detail on that. Can you describe the type of undercover work that you specialize in without really revealing too much?
It was buying large quantity of cocaine or marijuana. Marijuana was usually 20 pounds and above. I never bought under an ounce of cocaine. I never bought crack. I posed as a lot of times as a mistress of a rich guy that had someone else buying his drugs because he didn't want anyone else. I always had a nice car. That was my main cover story in a lot of the cases. If I bought large quantity, or I had this rich sugar daddy and these white people that were into cocaine and powder, and I would buy the drugs for them, their party drug.
You didn't have no fear, like somebody saying, "What does this short white woman want to do?" I don't like. Wouldn't the antennas go up? How did you overcome
Well, I
their
didn't look
suspicion?
like a cop at all. I had long hair, I dressed nice. I probably weighed 110, 120 pounds, and back then, if there was a female police officer, they were normally large and a lot tougher looking than I was. So people didn't suspect me as being a police officer. So I had that advantage.
All right, so you wake up in the morning, you're working undercover. What is a typical day of you working undercover?
Well, a lot of times it wasn't in your own bed. It was a hotel someplace away. I didn't spend a lot of time at home. Depending on the cases I was working, sometimes it was in an apartment that was set up for me. When I did get up, because it was usually late in the morning, because most things took place late at night, I would eat, work out, run. I've always been physical fit because that was important with the job you're doing, that you needed to take care of yourself, mentally and physically. So if you don't feed and fuel your body with the right things, physically your mind can suffer from that also. And a lot of times just reflecting, writing a lot of reports. Law enforcement is 90% report writing. What you do, you have to be able to document it on a report to pass on to the district attorneys so they have what they need to try the case.
Okay, fair enough. So were there any moments that really tested your ability to stay in character?
Yes. I was working undercover at a club. It was to purchase ecstasy. It was like a high energy club, and someone recognized me. And someone I knew that was younger than me, but was one of my friend's daughter's childhood friend. So she knew what I did for a living, and she followed me. She called my name, my correct name, and of course I didn't want anyone saying Sabra because how many Sabras are there? So I said, "Hey, let me buy you a drink," and I pulled her to the side, and she said, "I understand. I'm not going to say anything, but for my safety and the person's safety I was working with, we pulled ourselves and we didn't go back and work that particular club." But they were selling large amounts of party drugs at that location.
And so this is ecstasy around, do you remember around what year that was?
Oh, 80s.
80s, okay. All right, let's go into the psychological and emotional aspect of your job. did living a double life affect your sense of identity?
It did, and it could more if I wouldn't have been able to go home to Verdonville. And animals have always been my way to relax. So when I lived in Verdonville, I had a small farm. I had dogs. I knew I could go out behind my house and my family's property. I loved to ride horses. I brought myself back down to me by doing those things.
Okay, so that was your sanctuary.
That was my sanctuary. And a lot of times I didn't want people with me. I wanted to just be with me, which is really hard on my family. Like, they haven't seen me, they miss me, but I just didn't want to be around people till I got myself back to being Sabria again, and their daughter and their aunt and sister. So they understood, and my family was a blessing. I missed out on a lot of holidays and birthdays and special moments, but overall I think they understood and was proud of me for what I was doing.
Okay, typically how long did it take you once you got home? And I'm curious about that because a lot of times, like, I watch movies or I may watch an interview of somebody interviewing an undercover cop, and they say that they need a lot of time to really go find themselves. So you go home to Verdonville and you're around your animals. But how long did it take you? Did you snap right back, or?
No. You go through a decompression stage. So sometimes you would snap right back, depending. This particular case, you may have just gone in with someone and made one purchase. You're not involved in this case for weeks. Or it always bothered me, and I felt like it always took me longer when children were in the house when this was going on, or they brought children to their hotel when you're buying drugs, or have children in a car. Not being able to have children, I don't know. I think that would affect anyone, but it really bothered me, and it would take a long time. Like, I've had cases where I'd say, I'm not going to do this anymore. I can't see that. Or a woman being hit and abused, and I had to stay in character. That was really hard. That I didn't want to just flip a switch right then and there. But then when I take that witness stand and I sit on that witness stand and they say, oh my God, it was her, I was getting some, for the women and the children, I felt like I was getting them something back that was being taken, to get up there and testify.
Yeah, some type of justice.
Right.
I got you. So let's transition into you actually being the chief of the great town of Franklin, Louisiana. And with that being said, I call this section accountability and leadership. So looking back, what is the single decision or decisions you made as chief that you believe caused the most public backlash, and do you still stand by it?
Most public backlash. I always told people like it was, which that wasn't always accepted. The political bosses didn't always like, I didn't think politics and law enforcement should go together. If just because it's election time, we're gonna lock the doors of the police department, not go out and protect the streets because we don't want to arrest someone in the wrong family. I didn't like that, and I stood up for my beliefs. That politics and law enforcement. Some of the people I hired caused problems, and I do regret that. Maybe I missed something when I hired that person, or I've always considered myself a good judge of people, and usually my first instinct is right. And I wonder sometimes where my mind was when I may have hired that person. But I can't say I regret getting to know the people. I love Franklin. I love the people of Franklin. And so one of the best decisions I ever made was to get out and know the people of Franklin. Go sit down and have lunch, go visit, see if someone needed something, like a senior that was scared to get out of their home because what might be going on the streets, or a couple of times seniors that their grandchildren robbed them to get high, and those cases were always, I tried everything I could to console them and hopefully prevent that from happening again. So I definitely am happy about getting to know the people of Franklin, no matter their color, where they lived, what neighborhood they lived in. You should get to know all of Franklin, because you never know who's going to be a victim and who's going to need you.
Well, speaking of you missing Franklin, this is one of the questions I had for myself, and I wanted to ask you, if you had not resigned, what do you think Franklin would look like right now under your leadership?
I think for everyone there's a season, and my season was over with. I can't criticize the administration that is there now because I don't know what's going on. I was planning on retiring in like a year, 8 months to a year anyway. So when Mayor Fulcard wanted to go in a different direction, I respected that. And I said, I'll just retire early. I had 40 years.
How many?
40 years. I had maximum retirement. Things were changing in law enforcement. The law enforcement, the officers that you were hiring, I was hiring, didn't have. We did this coming up through the ages as we knew we were serving the people. It wasn't about money, because you don't make any money in law enforcement. It wasn't about you're cool and you're tough because you have this big badge on your chest. But I felt like the attitude of officers was also turning. I was always taught, you don't go home until the job's done. If you have a homicide, you don't go home and sleep. It could be a week later until there's no leads left to follow. Was all I would get was whining. Well, we need sleep. We want to have a football game on Sunday. There's a football game on Sunday. We want to go home. Well, that's not how it works. We have a job to do. We're serving people. There's victims, whether it be the person that was the victim of a homicide, their family. The suspect's family were victims. So, and that attitude was just leaving out the police work.
Okay. Well, I don't want to just quite leave that,
Okay.
leave that right there, because with all due respect to the current administration, because we're not talking politics, so I don't want you to feel like that you're taking anything away from them. But from the people I've talked to from doing research before I interviewed you, for example, and I know you know this because you keep your ears to the street. So we've been having a wave of a lot of shootings, for example, right? So someone said a couple days ago to me, and they were like, hey, you see all these shootings that they're having and so forth. They said, I guarantee you, if Ms. Hill would have still been in office, it probably would have started, but she'd have damn sure stopped it. Do you believe?
I'm not there to know exactly what they're doing, but I definitely would have done things differently. Not saying what I would have done would have been better than what they're doing, but no, I'd have been on them streets and I'd been knocking at mamas and daddies and grandmothers and grandfathers' doors, and we'd be doing search warrants, taking guns off the street, and they would not be intimidating and shut down streets. I hear that people have to get in their car and go to the next street because they won't even move out the street. Oh no, they're not paying any taxes paying for those streets, and they're not going to keep someone from driving down a street. Or I hear people won't come out of their house at nighttime because of the people should not live in fear. No, that I would definitely do things different.
Yeah, I figured
If I would have to stay up for a week without any sleep, and the officers would have to get out and do their job.
See, that's why I think your reputation was kind of taking a hit because people feel like your tactics were, I guess, like straight in your face,
Right.
but it worked, obviously, you know what I mean? Around that time, whenever you were in office.
Well, I would get out and speak to, if you're on the street doing wrong, I'm going to get out and talk to you. And one of the things I'm going to tell you, even you get right or you'll see me again. And it won't be a conversation. It'll be involving bracelets. You know, get your life together. Stop breaking your mama's heart. Stop terrorizing the street, or you don't need to be on the street. So
Fair
yeah,
enough.
I guess I was in their face when it came to that.
So, speaking of reputation, this correlates this question here. What do you think the public misunderstood about your leadership, and what do you think they understood correctly?
I think they felt like I didn't treat people fairly, that I picked on people. Never ever did I pick on people. If they wanted to use the word pick on people, for instance, we was talking about someone on the street terrorizing the neighborhood and selling dope and guns and stuff. If you want to say I picked on that person, I guess that would be a different word, but it was important to me that person didn't terrorize the street. But I think everyone, if they want to admit, they knew they could come to me and I was going to be fair, and I was going to I had an open door policy. If a son was in jail or a daughter was in jail and mom wanted to come sit down and talk, they knew that they could come talk to me. I want to believe I was fair to everyone, even though I don't think certain people think I was fair to everyone. Well, when you're out doing a crime like armed robbery and someone hates you because you arrested them for armed robbery, but think about the person you pointed that gun to. That clerk left that job because they were scared to death, but that clerk was feeding their family, their children, and you pointed a gun and changed their entire life. So yeah, I don't feel bad that I arrested them. I feel bad that they chose that direction in life to go in.
Okay, so that's one of the things that you think the public probably misunderstood about you, but here's where a little pushback may come. So some people may say, and I'm speaking about people in Franklin, well, you know, she helped out, or she was on my case and she did this for me, she did that, but the people who were under her, they were kind of rough with the civilians of Franklin. And when I say the people, like the people under you, so for example, you had the two infamous people that I know of growing up with, like Charles Poole and Buster. They didn't have the best relationship. Not saying it was all bad, but they probably didn't have the best relationship with the people of Franklin when it came down to hands-on and they carrying out arrests.
I agree with that. And I agree, I had some other officers was the same way. When someone came in to file a complaint, I thought it was important that I just couldn't take the citizen's word over the officer's word. I had to investigate both sides of it. Make sure there was not a motive why that person came in and filed that complaint. One of the things that we did when I first became chief, I thought it was important to have a complaint form. Like if someone had a complaint about one of the officers, come in and file that complaint. Let's investigate it. A lot of times I pulled from different agencies in cases to investigate the complaints because I wanted it to be investigated properly. Sometimes people were terminated. I had officers that were charged. If you're doing dirt, I think a cop should get double the time of a civilian. Like you get arrested for selling drugs, you have the sentencing guidelines. I think if a cop gets arrested for selling drugs, they should get 2 times what the other person got because they ought to know better. And there's nothing that bothers me more than a dirty cop because you've taken an oath and the people to trust you, and you violated the people in that oath. So, like Poole and Ward, eventually, they were not from Franklin. So sometimes that's a good thing, hiring people from other agencies so they're not turning their back because I know this one's family, I know that one's family, if someone's out there doing something wrong. But also it can be a hard thing because they don't have any compassion for the community because they're not from the community. Eventually, I understood that and they had to go. But it took a while. And maybe it took more time. Maybe it took more time for me to realize that than it should have. You know, I can always look back on things that I've done in my career, and there's always room for improvement. I won't say I was the perfect person, the perfect chief, because there's always things you wish you would have done different.
So that kind of goes back to what you said earlier about having that blind spot. Maybe it was something that you missed during the interview process or
Correct.
something. Okay. All right. So staying on controversy and public trust, let me ask you, what is one allegation or public narrative about you that was completely false and one that had some truth?
Smoking crack. I arrested people for drugs, and the first thing would say, "Hey, how you arresting me when you get high?" And I thought about that after we spoke the first time, and should I really tell where that rumor started?
Do tell.
And so I said, no, this is a truthful conversation. So now is where we want to speak that truth. Well, when I was working at the task force, I met a man working out at the gym in Morgan City. He was black. So I was dating a black man. Well, certain white people said, oh, she's a white woman that has a good job. She must be smoking crack to be dating a black man. And that's how that rumor started. And it just blew up from there. So, and I remember the first time I was a white person, a white officer, actually said that to my face. Well, you must be smoking crack or doing drugs, you're dating this black man. A man that was a good man. He never did drugs. He worked hard, went to college, never even smoked marijuana. But yet, he was judged and I was judged because I was a white woman. But I never looked at people because of the color of their skin. I love people on what they have inside. None of us should judge people because the color of their skin. If you have a conversation, are you going to have a conversation? Are you black or you're white? No, or whatever color. You should believe and be friends and care for people because of what they have inside of them.
Okay, so for the people who's going to be watching this interview, they could say, oh, that was a very smooth way for her to just go ahead and bypass that. But people, the rumor has been very heavy. For example, let's take it back to the previous interviews that I had.
Mm-hmm.
So we had people like Chris Bosh, for example. He said it, those allegations, and then you have one of his former runners, Demon. And if you go back in the interview, Demon said even the former police was smoking crack. And so, and if you listen to the interview, I said, she what? Because keep in mind, I'm not from that era, so
Right.
that threw me off. And I asked him, I said, so is that one of the persons you served? He said, well, I didn't have to, but it was my dope, and I knew where it was. And besides those people, you know, for whatever reason, that's been a heavy rumor in Franklin, even the comment section.
It's been a rumor since the 90s. So it's been out there, and it's grown legs like any other rumor, and then it'll lose some momentum, and then it would grow legs again. I don't smoke cigarettes. I don't drink alcohol. Maybe I'm a control freak in that way. I want to be in control of me. I don't want something that put something in my body I'm not in control of. And if anyone out there wants to admit, they know I've always worked out hard, you know, I've always had, before my husband and I married, I didn't make much money. I'd sometimes work the police department and 2 other jobs, but I always had a nice home. I drove a decent car. That's kind of okay, you smoke crack, but you have these things and you take care of yourself. If they really think back, does that even make sense? Another thing, when you're working undercover, you have to those things come up when you take the witness stand. So it's very important that the DA's office has the evidence they need to maintain your integrity when you take the stand. Say you're testifying in a case that the person could get life, and the jury is saying, oh, this person gets on the stand, this person gets on the stand and says, hey, I did drugs with her, she did drugs while she was working undercover. I never ever had to do drugs when I was working undercover. Now, never even had a gun to my head, because they always say the only way you do that is if someone puts a gun to your head and it's your life or their life. You know, your life if you don't do this drug. But that never happened to me. What would I have done in that situation? I can't tell you. So I had, everyone knows I had really long hair back then. So we did hair analysis. Can't beat a hair analysis. You can beat a drug screen, which I'm sure everyone knows, which we did drug screens all the time. That was something we did voluntarily, and then the administration would pull names random and pop random drug screens on us. But in 1994, I did a drug screen because I had some cases coming up that they went back 3 years. So when you cut a portion of your hair, they usually scan it for 3 years of drugs. Any drug, any drugs don't leave your hair ever until it grows out and it goes away. So if you did drugs a year ago and your hair is a year of growth on your hair, it's going to show back a year ago. So they did a hair analysis. I went to New Orleans, to the DA's office there, and it went back 3 years. So it's 3-month blocks of a hair analysis for 3 years. And before you leave, I'll show it to you.
Okay.
So I'm talking, but I'll show you the proof.
I most definitely understand. But right now, here's the interview where we're kind of putting everything to bed. And what I don't want is for people to say that you gave a fluff answer, or for them to be like, "Well, Grim, you didn't quite challenge challenge her on that." So, what do you say to the people who may say, "Well, she's the chief of police. She could easily find out when there's going to be a drug test coming up, or she can get one of the people who were very, very loyal to her to go ahead and give her some hair or something like that." So, what do you say to those people?
Well, first of all, the hair analysis were not done. They cut your hair in front of you. So you're not sending off your hair. When I went to New Orleans, they lifted my hair, and underneath they cut out about a quarter size area of my hair. And then my hair was it was down past my waist. They do that. Also, when we take drug screens, the company that does the drug screens, they come in the restroom with you and watch you give your urine sample. I know with some companies with you work, and we used to do drug screens at the police department, and we would catch people that had bladders with other people's urine and stuff. That wasn't gonna happen. And we had officers that came up positive for drug screens.
Yeah, if it's in the hair, it's in the hair.
Right. We had officers that it came up positive on urinalysis, and they lost their job.
Okay, so while we're staying on the controversy in the public trust, another rumor that was going on, we could put to bed here. It was noted that you had an intimate relationship with one of your officers by the name of Mr. Charles Poole.
I did. Prior to being chief of police, I did. I was a single woman. Prior to me becoming chief, that had to end. My career was important to me. And I think most people can tell you through my life, I wasn't ready to get married and settle down until I was a good place in my career. So men came and went. My career came first. I could take care of myself. I never wanted to depend on a man to do it. So it was ended prior to me becoming chief of police. And it only went on for a very short time. He was working at Morgan City Police Department when we met.
Okay, do you personally feel like that relationship kind of it put the people at Franklin like, man, can we trust them, because they kind of like break? I mean, you're free to date, but yeah, you think?
Absolutely, because he's out there like when he's out of my sight. I don't know what, later on I found out, or when people would finally be brave enough to trust that they could come and tell me what was going on, so an investigation could be, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Because you see where it's going, right? Because if I'm dating my boss, I can go out and do what I want to do because I know I'm gonna be protected. You know what I mean?
And I can understand when people believe that. But if people knew me, they knew better. And that's why it was so important to me that that ended before I became his boss, the chief of police.
Roger, that's fair enough. So we put those to bed. All right, so let's move on to police culture and systemic issues. Ms. Hill, what is the biggest problem inside police culture that the civilians don't see?
The biggest problem that citizens don't see?
That we don't see.
Police officers, 99% of them are just like everyone else sitting in the room. They hurt, their families hurt, they can't show that, but many times we sit in a room after certain cases and we all cry, men and women. You know, it bothers, you know, when we see bad things, it hurts. You go sleepless nights. To this day, I wake up in the middle of the night, my husband's like shaking me and in cold sweats and even crying of things that I saw and dealt with on the street. And I think the community don't see that in law enforcement. But, and a lot of officers, it gets to them and they have to get out of it. Some of the best officers I know just couldn't deal with it anymore and they got out of it. And I think more of those officers were leaving the job when I decided to retire than stay. They just couldn't deal with it anymore.
You see, that's why I think it was important to do this interview, because people they wouldn't know that. You know what I mean? I think when you look at an officer, they have that uniform on, you're already going to have your
cocky.
You're already going to have your preconceived notion of them, and it's probably not going to be a good one. But that's why I'm glad we're doing this, because I remember one time during a sidebar conversation, if you don't mind me sharing, you was like, Trevin, I feel like sometimes I had to be, or let people think I was sadistic to a certain extent, because I had to do my job.
Correct.
You know, but many nights I would come home and cry. So I see you're human, so I could definitely see that.
And not saying because I was a woman, but I had to be a little stronger. Like, oh, she's just a crybaby woman. She can't handle this job. Oh, she just, you know, she just gonna cry about everything. She can't handle this situation. So I couldn't show that part of me. But I wrote a post when we sold our home on Facebook. If people go back and look, my husband redid our bathroom. He put a TV, a big soaking tub. Our foyer, he painted it, I like orange, which you can see. He painted it a warm orange. So when I'd walk through the door at night, there was a room in the hallway that Harold DeFields would know. We talked about him earlier because he did a lot of the helped do a lot of remodeling at my house. We call it the cop room. I'd walk in there, I would take my gun, everything off, my clothes, because I always felt like dirty when I got home. Like I had to just rid myself of what I dealt with, especially some days more than other. And I walk down and I'd go to the bedroom and bathroom, and my husband would not, he was always home way before me. He would not bother me. He knew I needed to get my mind right. I'd go to that bathroom, I'd soak in the tub, and as the days went, as the time went on, the bad would go away, and then I could go and enjoy our time together. But I had to go through that time, and that was most days when I left the job.
Most days?
Most days.
Okay. All right, so next would be, in your experience, what is the real reason police reform moves so slowly?
Politics. You always, since I started, they always said law enforcement doesn't make any money, because if it's a job that makes money, then people are just going to be doing it for the job, not because of what they have in their heart to do. But let's think about that. Do you want to pay teachers and police officers like your child's life depends on it? No one ever thinks about that. And what a teacher is in your child's life for a long time, and what they mold is very important, correct?
Right.
But they don't pay teachers anything. After school, or if they deal with something, law enforcement and teachers are paid horribly. Most of them have to have 3 and 4 jobs to survive, or most of them get into illegal activity because they can't pay the bills for their family. So I think that education, training is definitely should be moved to the top of the list. I remember having a budget where my training for the whole year for my officers was $500 in my budget to train the whole department. That's what I had to spend.
It's like you're being set up for failure.
Exactly. And the officers were being set up for failure because then they do dumb stuff because they don't know any better. And when Mayor Harris became mayor, he's like, he moved that to the top. Education is important to him. He moved that to the top of the list. He started an education incentive where you made more money. If you got your associate degree, you made more money on your check. If you got your BA, you made more money. If you got a bachelor, if you went and got certified in first responder, because usually law enforcement cops are the first one on the scene. So wouldn't you think it's important that they know medical? Because the few minutes that they're there waiting for an ambulance or waiting for a fire department, a person could die. So that was another thing. Put AEDs in cars. My budget went up like greatly. My husband and I when I got married, he didn't make a lot of money, but we didn't need extra money. You know, if we had extra money, I paid for schools out my own pocket. We bought canines for the police department. We bought equipment for the police department. Uniforms. You got 2 uniforms and they had to last 2 years. When you're working 5 days a week and then having to work extra details, they started the take-home unit policy because most cops can't pay insurance on 2 vehicles, their wife's vehicle or their husband's vehicle, and a vehicle for them to get back and work. So there is a lot of things, but yeah, that
Okay, I know you
police
don't want to.
reform is just so behind times.
I know you don't want to pat on the
Culture.
back.
You know, understand people of different cultures, different religion. That's through training and education you learn those things. When I sent a bunch of my lieutenants to a school in Lake Charles, and all of them came back. And it was about dealing with people of different cultures and knowing what they like. Walking in their house, it might be important that you take your shoes off. And they're scared to tell you as an officer, but you should do that. So that's just a small thing, but it was a big school, and they were so happy to have gone to that 1 week school.
Now, Ms. Hill, I know you don't want to pat on the back, but you know we got to tell the good and the bad. I heard you mention that you and your husband like brought K9s for the department and uniforms. Was that for Franklin? Yeah, that's very commendable right there.
We would usually spend between $10,000 and $20,000 a year of our own money on the police department. Everything that I had, I bought. Like if I would get a unit, my husband would buy all of the equipment for inside the unit, the lights, the siren, everything. And a lot of the other units, we didn't have money. You know, they had a bubble light you might could put in that you plug into a cigarette lighter, and we purchased those things. The officers didn't have flashlights. If you had one of the flashlights, you had to buy it yourself. So we did those things. Criminal code books. Each year, crimes change, and it's important. Well, now you buy a disc because you have a computer. When we went with computers inside the cars, we purchased computers. It was just a lot of things. Tires for units because the tires were blowing out. But like I said, we don't want to pat on the back for that. We didn't do it. We did it. We're glad we could do it. We did without because that was more important. My husband, father, he was a military brat. His father retired as a sergeant major, so service is very important to him. And
Right.
he just couldn't believe what those officers were having to go without. Bulletproof vest. We bought bulletproof vests. And then I started a program where I went to businesses and asked them to adopt a cop and buy vests. And then later on, I was able to, when grants were big, I was able to write grants for their vests.
Okay. Can't beat that. So switching gears a little bit and back into the policing in Franklin, okay?
Okay.
So did you have a certain group of people or areas that you targeted the most? And if so, why?
Yes, but not because I was targeting them because they were black or they lived in a poor area. That's where they went to do their dirt. They may not even live on one of the streets, but that's where they went because I guess that's where their customers were. But I can tell you, if someone was selling dope in Eastwood, I was going there too. And I didn't get, and it could be a white person because that's happened. That's not saying the names, but that's happened. And to be very frank, because we talked about being honest, white people don't tell on other white people like black people tell on them. I just have to say it honestly.
It is what it is.
It was, it was hard to get into some of those people. Not that they wasn't selling dope, or committing crimes. Now, if they were committing burglaries and stuff, that was a different circumstance. But if they were up on a level where they were a dealer, it was hard to get into those people. Usually it was mad girlfriends or parents that wanted it to stop because they felt like their son or daughter was gonna die or someone was gonna kill them. But it's a hard thing to say, but I told you, we talked about being strictly honest in what it was in my career, and that's how it was.
Okay, all right, and I'm just shaking my head because it's like
And it should have been that way.
Yeah. So the next one, and this was a question that was sent to me, by the way. It says, how did you go about picking your staff? Because people like the Buster, the Charles Pools, and the Tina, they were extremely loyal to you. How did you go about picking your staff to have you with that armor? Was it certain characteristics you were looking for, or what?
No, they applied. I want to say I treated them fairly. We were just like we talked about, my husband and I buying equipment. I think they saw me as maybe the mom, the older aunt. We took care of them. I didn't want them to go out there unequipped. I was also there if they had something in their life, like a death, or maybe they couldn't pay their electricity bill. A lot of times, Clico would call me because one of my officers' electricity was cut off or their water was cut off. And I would just go take care of it without even telling the officer.
So Clico, they just knew to call you because you would take care of it?
Yeah, because they didn't have the money to, it's a shame they didn't have the money to pay, cops didn't have the money to pay their light bill. It was pay the light bill or buy food for their children or a lot of times it was prior to the beginning of school year. So we buy our children, what they need to start school or pay the electric bill.
Okay.
And I think that's something a lot of people don't know about police officers.
Okay, so this is one of the things I'm interested about. As you know, I got the series Franklin Tales, and you watched them as well. One of my most intriguing guests would have to be a gentleman by the name of Mr. Chris Byes.
Henry Chris Byes.
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, he was one of the first ones to catch a RICO charge in Louisiana. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. Tell me about your relationship and what you know about Mr. Chris Byes.
Did Chris say it was okay for me to talk about that? Okay. So I guess my first dealings with Chris is that him and one of his lady friends would go into like appliance stores like Sears and J.C. Penney's, and his lady friend would pretend to lay on the floor and have a seizure, and he'd run out with an appliance. So they had that going on for a while. Then Chris got involved. Car dealerships, they used to put the keys, instead of locking them up inside, they had key boxes. I don't know if you're too young to remember where they had the key boxes on the windows. Well, were the keys for the car. Well, they got access to a pass key, and that was the next thing that he was involved in, was stealing cars and taking and selling them at chop shops. And he got caught at that. And when he came home, that's when he met someone that brought him into the cocaine business.
Frank Haywood.
Frank Haywood from Lake Charles.
See, that's the part that when I talk to you sidebar, like Chris mentioned in the interview that Frank was his plug, and he mentioned how they would make their little runs to Lake Charles and everything like that. And I guess the undercover you said you pretty much already knew that. Like, how did you know that? Without being too detailed, how did you know that?
It was my job, and I believed in having a conversation with people. I'd find out a lot of stuff. People would say people were ratty, but if you just sit down and have a conversation with someone, you'd be surprised what information they'll just let out. I told you about a particular incident where I was running an undercover operation in Franklin. I wasn't the person undercover, but someone else was, and it was street level, and they were buying weed on the street by Pecos, and they came back with this matchbox with this white thing that looked like a rock, and I'm like, what is that? And they's like, that's rock. And I'm like, well, what are you doing with it? Because I had never seen it, never heard of it. Even with all the schools that we were going to, we heard in California it was blowing up with the gangs and stuff, but never seen it in Franklin. Well, so we tested it because you have field test kits, and it tested positive for cocaine. So now I have a problem, because that particular time we were running an undercover officer in Franklin and out in St. Joseph too. Because I was dual commissioned, even though I was a Franklin police officer, I had a sheriff's office commission. So we would work with each other and run operations. So a burglary started picking up, shoplifting, just crime, and everything was surrounded about people stealing to buy crack. So that's when Chris's name really blew up. That Chris went from Chris involved in thefts and to Chris involved and put poison on the street. I knew he had ladies that he was prostituting, which really, really bothered me a lot, because every one of those ladies were someone's daughter. And I just felt like oh, well, they're choosing to do this. Oh, they're choosing to smoke crack. But we don't know what's bad going on in their life where they're making those bad decisions. So at that point, every time we worked an operation, every time we worked a search warrant, it was like Chris Buys was at the end of where the dope eventually came down. Now, it may have been Chris to someone, to the person that we were doing the search warrant. And just, frankly, crime just went out of control. So everyone, the district attorney, other agencies within the parish, other agencies in parishes next to us, Chris's name was coming up. And so the key was to work cases on Chris because of all of the poisoning he was providing. Homicides was related to crack, burglaries were related to crack, domestic violence was related to crack. It was just, you would interview and some way crack was involved in those crimes. Whether it was to get high, whether it was you owed the dealer money, whether it was a robbery involving someone stealing someone else's dope. It was just blowing up. And so at that point, everyone that I interviewed, whether they were a shoplifter, and that's another thing officers don't do now. I talked to everyone that was arrested that came into that police station, no matter what crime it was. That's how I knew some way it was related to this. Not necessarily they were going to give me, okay, I'm going to go out and buy dope for you for this individual. But if you sit down and talk to an individual, a lot of times there's something in their life that led to that shoplifting arrest. Why did you have to shoplift? And it was always Chris is name coming up. So eventually you interview the right person to bust Chris Buys. Henry Chris Buys.
Yeah, I mean, he was a very, very intriguing man.
He's very intelligent when it comes to the streets too.
Okay, so this platform is not about, I guess, quote unquote, exposing or like that, but we're just trying to get the insides about it. So without giving too much information, you think it was someone within that stopped that operation from thriving further? Not think, because you would know.
Was someone in the organization the one that actually led to his arrest?
Yes.
Not really.
Not really.
And one of the I noticed in the interview, Chris said he didn't touch the dope. So they thought if you didn't touch the dope, because you always had to educate yourself, and they were constantly educating themselves on what it would be to make a case against them. So Chris thought if I don't touch the dope, I just touch the money, they can't arrest me. Well, that's not true. So Chris didn't touch the dope, but he touched the state's money each time. He was waiting to get that money put in his hand. And you have to make so many cases involving so many people within his enterprise, because he did have an enterprise, and that's what racketeering, you have to prove that what they're doing has led to enterprise and more people are involved. So you have to basically start a chart and have to connect all of that to make that racketeering case. And that was my first really big case that I was the case agent on. Not that, because I had made undercover buys that were big cases, but there was an agent that was the case agent that was developing all those things, and I was just a part in their puzzle. So this was the first case that I was putting the puzzle together. And Chris had to have that money. And so we put all those pieces together, and the last day he was arrested when he took the last money.
Okay, he also in the interview he mentioned, and I thought this was really funny, because keep in mind, I didn't, only heard stories about you, I didn't know, but he said in the interview that you told him, he said, Chris, see that Cadillac that you have, you see this that you have, I'm going to be driving that. Is
I
that
did
any
tell
truth to
him
it?
that. I did tell him that. Because he was so proud of hauling those girls around and his Cadillac, and it was like a status symbol to him. I sell dope, I'm a pimp, this is my Cadillac, blah, blah. And he always dressed nice. And so, and as he was blowing up on the street, just like I told you before, I go talk to people and say, hey, get out the gang, get off the street, or you will see me again. Well, Chris and I had that talk more than one time, and I told him, I said, I'm gonna eventually drive that Cadillac that you paying for with girls that are have them laying on their back and the cocaine you're selling. And we took that Cadillac, and it stayed parked on the courthouse parking lot for a week as law enforcement status symbols saying, Chris Spies is not putting poison on the street of St. Mary Parish anymore.
Roger that. So my last question about that would be, did you close this case yourself, or did you collab with the feds? It was just like all state?
This was all state.
So this is all you?
This was me. I had like other agencies involved. I had someone working the equipment we used. Well, I won't get into what equipment, but I had someone operating that from another agency. Because Chris knew a lot of people, and were they all on the streets? I don't think so. And I can say that because it was proven afterwards. So I used people that wasn't here, equipment that wasn't here. The money came from, because it was a large amount of money we were drawing out to work the case. It came from the district attorney's office, so no one knew. So it was only certain people all of the people I used were not from St. Mary Parish except me.
You something else.
I had to think. He's thinking, I had to think too.
Okay. So one thing you said probably about a minute ago, I just want to bring that up. You said that, and this is also what I heard. So let me explain this to the audience, because you got to give the good, the bad, the ugly. This is my sidebar. So like I told you, I did extensive research before I sat down here with you today for this interview. And a lot of people I talked to, pretty much everybody I talked to, they all said pretty much the same thing, damn near verbatim. They said, man, actually, before Sabria busted me, she actually gave me a warning. What made you find, I'm gonna call it compassion, what kind of made you have the compassion to even tell people to get out the game before I come? What was your motivation behind it?
Because everyone that walks on this earth has something good to contribute to it. And they have something good deep down inside. Now, yes, there are people that just have no good, but the majority, that percentage is so low. So I wanted them not to spend life in prison. I wanted them to take the knowledge of, I can count how many rocks I can make off of one cookie. I can take an ounce and how many ounces and how I can turn this money in. So if you have that knowledge, imagine if you apply that at a bank. Imagine if you're on a shipyard and you're fabricating and you're using numbers. So they had so much to contribute, and I really hope they would, that one warning, they would stop doing what they were doing instead of, what good were they going to do in the penitentiary? Their mama was going to be hurt. The people they're poisoning on the street. I think you and I talked about it. You know, do the dealers really think about their victims? You know, how many houses I went in and children didn't have food because mom and dad was taking all of the money and smoking dope and getting high off of it. So you take no diapers or Pampers, babies just running around with feces all over. You know, women getting beat. Like I mentioned earlier, I worked a few cases where grandmother was beat by a grandson because they wouldn't give them the last money they had to buy food or pay rent, because they wouldn't give their loved ones money to go get high off of. So if I could stop that with just a conversation, then I was thinking about all of the other victims out there that would stop. Because when they're out there making that dollar, they don't think of that. They don't. But drug dealers have a lot of victims. Homicides related to drugs. So many crimes. I would say probably 90%, 80% of the crimes at work was some way related to narcotics.
Okay, so whenever you warned somebody, was it impulse or was it a conscious decision, like the night before, like you're telling yourself, I'm gonna warn this bastard to knock it off, I'm gonna give him a shot?
It was a conscious decision that I would think about and even if I knew they wasn't gonna listen to me, I felt like I had to go try. And if I didn't go try, was I really doing my job serving the people? I know that's kind of a cliche, but you know, I would go out there and I'd even have sometimes more than one conversation. And then if they were back out there, then I would send an undercover officer because they wanted to continue to create victims. So.
All right, so we're gonna move on to ethics and legacy, right? So, what is the one mistake you wish you could publicly apologize for, if any, when you serve as the police chief, the chief of police, excuse me? But if any, you may not have any.
Oh no, I would say there's several things to apologize for. You know, I'm not a perfect person. None of us are perfect. I made mistakes. I want to say that I listened, but I don't think I listened enough. And that bothers me. Could I have helped more people if I would have listened more? Like really listened. Not solving some of the homicides that I couldn't solve. Yes, I solved a lot of them, but it hurts me knowing that I couldn't give some kind of closure to those families. I think that's the biggest thing in my career that I feel the worst about, was not giving closure to families of homicide victims.
Speaking of homicide victims, and before we get into this is just a disclaimer for the audience. I was given permission to talk about these cases, and I just want to say, for the people who may have a problem with it, just don't have anything to do with you, Miss Hill. A lot of you guys want, I guess what we want to call the dumb stuff, who snitched, who ratted, but these things right now that we're about to talk about is very important. So if you want to hear the dumb stuff, let's hear about the things that can help our community, like solving these murders. So with that being said, I got permission from the Henry family, and they want to know, what are your thoughts on the Kalen Henry, aka Cootie Bane case?
A child that lost his life too soon. I see at nighttime when I lay down where he laid with his duffel bag beside him. I think about his case a lot. If I get information, I pass it on to the new chief. I don't know what's done. I don't know if he can if people will talk to him. That case had so much noise surrounding it that people refused to talk to us. I remember family members making their family come to the police station to talk to us because they wouldn't come on their own. Now, this is a family member, and I won't get into who within the family wouldn't come talk to me because it's still a pending case. It'll be pending until someone eventually, the case is solved. Do I believe I have a good idea of what happened? Yes, I believe that. But believing and being able to prove it in court is a whole different thing. But, there was rallies in the park with people speaking, and I, upset in the community because it was a 19-year-old child, and he really was a good person. He was funny. If you got to know him, I think about him at 416 Robinson, like clowning because I didn't catch him, maybe doing something they wasn't supposed to be doing. But he never was into like majorly bad stuff or anything. But I think of it and I can see him. If I go to Franklin, he's buried in Petco Park Cemetery. I still go by there when no one's around. And I guess I probably shouldn't tell that because that's me still thinking about him. But there was so much noise about that case, and it made me mad that people didn't understand all that outside noise and interference. All they were doing was keeping people from talking to us or pointing us in different directions, and it was just a very strange case because normally people are going to talk to me about a homicide, but in this case they wouldn't. And I feel like it's a case that should have been solved. Even though we would get information, we'd get search warrants for DNA, we tried to follow up as much as we possibly could, but it was like Franklin closed doors and no one wanted to speak. But there's a 19-year-old kid that was brutally killed. So everyone should have been talking to us.
Roger that. And rest in peace to him. Hate to hit you with another one back to back like that, but it's another one. I got permission from the family to discuss this one, and this is Mr. Harold Fields. They want to get your thoughts on that case as well.
Harold Fields happened at Mon Ami. I got a call in the early morning hours that happened. Harold was a good person. His mom loved him dearly. Harold had so much potential. We remodeled some of the stuff at our house, and Harold was wanting to learn a trade and enjoyed like designing and carpenter work, and he was good at it. And he did the work at my house with someone. They finished shortly before his homicide. Another case, people didn't want to tell what happened. It was Mon Ami's parking lot. There was a ton of people out there. No one wanted to talk, which is very upsetting. People from Franklin, and Harold was not a fighter. he hung around. He was more of like the fun part of the party, but not one to get out and fight in the streets. We would get called about fights and on Ibert Street and Divert Street, but Harold was never in. He might be sitting on the sidewalk watching what was going on, but Harold wasn't the one that was fighting. He just never was a troublemaker, and of all people, I never expected to get a call that morning that Harold DeFields had been shot. There were so many rumors. He had a gun, this one had a gun, they picked up a gun, but no one wanted to sit down and talk about really what happened. And it's sad. I think it's a case that could be solved. And even though there was arrest made and this made, it's not too late for those people that were in that parking lot to go and speak and talk to the authorities and let his mom have some peace. Even after these years, is it fair that his family are still having to suffer through that? I'm sure, just like I think about him, and I have to smile because I'd pull up and he'd say, "Not me, Chief, you already know that. It's not me involved." And I did know, I always knew that. He was out there, but he wasn't going to be involved. And he always would give me this funny looking little grin. But it could be your brother, your sister, a family member that you love and care about. And after these years, they're still suffering because there hasn't been any closure. And that's a case that definitely could be closed. I do know Iberia Sheriff's Office talked to a lot of people. They probably don't know that because we were getting information, I was getting information, Tina was getting information. We were making sure we were passing everything on. They would come to Franklin if a name would pop up from Franklin, and we would find that person to get them to come in and talk. Most of the time someone said, "Oh, I didn't see it. Oh, I was there, but I was in the club," or "I was running the other way," or "I got in the car ready to leave," when they knew that wasn't true from other people.
Roger that. Well, just want to say, as a Franklin resident native, rest in peace to those guys. Hope it gets solved. It has been a huge thing, and I guess it's going to be popular. But let's go ahead and talk about. You ready, Ms. Hill?
I'm ready.
Informants.
I mean, that's what everyone wanted
That's
to talk
what
about.
everyone wants to know about. The informants. Okay. So let's start off. Just a couple of questions about it. It says, while you were the chief, were informants compensated financially through protection or through reduced charges? And who approved those deals, if so?
If it was reduced charges, only the district attorney could approve that. So if a person wanted to get their charges dropped or reduce a charge, we would have to go to the district attorney's office, and permission would have to be from them. And then anything that we did, we had to write a report, and it had to constantly, the district attorney or assistant district attorney that was assigned to the case would have to be updated on anything involving that.
Was it frequent that people would ask for those type of deals?
Yes.
So would they take the deal and say, "I'll go back on the street and get you what you need," type of thing?
Well, not in some cases. Some cases it was just talking about like how things worked. They, in some cases they were charged with things that they couldn't just be let back on the street. Sometimes family members got involved and helped with those charges, their charges, because they couldn't be back on the street. In those cases, the charges were usually only reduced if it was a bad enough situation that they couldn't go back on the street. So, you know, it was different. It was a case by case with each one of those cases. Some people, and of course, if we were in the interview room and they asked me that, I wasn't able to approve it. Only the district attorney's office could approve anything. You would never, it was illegal to promise someone something that you couldn't do. And a police officer cannot promise someone charges are gonna be dropped. Only the district attorney. And they're the only one with the power to do it.
Was there ever pressure to use compensation to buy information, even when their credibility was at stake?
I'm not, if their credibility, I'm not taking the chance of one of my officers getting killed or someone else getting killed or harmed if I can't verify what you're sending. Some of them were paid with money. That was a whole different huge amount of documentation you had to do. They had to sign for the money that you're giving them, and it had to be audited at the end of the year through the city audit, but that was kept confidential in a confidential area, files, money. So you had a narcotic account that was separate that the auditors would audit. And so depending on what kind of case meant what kind of money they were paid.
Okay, so are they
on
paid,
the federal level, state level, municipal level?
Are they paid case by case, or are some informers on payroll down there?
No, there wasn't on payroll, so it was case by case. Some of them made good money.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. Speaking of that, you told me one time, and I think people need to hear this. You told me that people thought that you put so much pressure on people in the interrogation room, but you really didn't. They would freely just speak, pretty much. Was that surprising to you?
No. I never believed in I watched it when I first came up, this bad cop, good cop situation. That doesn't work. You can't threaten people and expect them to give you a truthful answer. They're just going to give you an answer so you don't threaten them anymore. You know, you want to sit down and have a conversation. And a lot of times, you just sit down and listen, you get all kinds of information. Wasn't surprising. They told me, they said, oh yeah, you go in the interrogation room and you bat those blue eyes and everyone's gonna tell you everything that you wanna know. Well, I don't think it was my blue eyes. I think it was, I treated people like people and not, you can't holler and scream at someone and expect them they're gonna tell you something. Most of the time, I never sat behind a desk. I sat beside the person. And
that's a tactic.
Just like people had tactics on the street, I had tactics. You wanted to have a conversation. But yeah, when you put a desk between you, it becomes like too scripted. Yeah.
Okay. So let me ask
and
you
I'm
this.
sure some people watching this will remember those days I sat beside them in a chair.
Let me ask you this. What did recruiting and working with informants teach you about human behavior?
A lot. some people are just natural liars, and they think that they can con anyone to get what they want. And some people are scared, and you can't trust a lot of people. A lot of informants you're talking to, they're worse than the bad guy because they work in both sides. So, you only, certain informants I didn't trust. Even when after the case was made, I always made sure that I knew everything because, and I'm sure a lot of people think, oh, this person was given information, that person was given me information. But I knew what was going on in the streets, but it always wasn't informants that gave me information. I think I told you this. There were certain cases that family members would call me because they were so scared they were about to lose their loved one to gun violence, to addiction, and they were safer and they knew they were safe if they were in jail or in treatment.
I could believe that.
So it was always very hard for that family member to do, but you have to understand what they were going through. And they had run out of any other way to save their loved one. And that happened a lot more than you think.
Okay. Now, this is one thing I wanted to bring up to you. With the current climate of gun violence in the city of Franklin, this is relevant. I talked to a few individuals. They actually do a lot for the community. And these two individuals, I want to go ahead and give them their props because they really do a lot for the community. One's by the name of Joseph McDaniel, you can call him Joe High, and another one is by the name of Tiger Boda, they call him Guru.
His first name's Anthony.
This is what they told me. They said one day, this is verbatim now, they said that you told them, I think you're pretty much on your way getting ready to retire. They said, you said, y'all want me out of this seat so bad, but when I leave this town, it's going to get bad and nobody will ever be able to control it.
I did.
You remember that?
Mm-hmm. Because it was getting out of control. And men like them wasn't helping. They were helping, but you got to get on the street. They need some mentors out there. And they'll tell you I told them that more than one time.
But you see, whenever he told me this, it stuck with him.
Oh, it did.
Yes,
I didn't know that they would probably even remember the
that. So he was telling me like.
And I'm sure they tell you I was always on them talking to them because I seen potential in them. Yeah. Joe High could talk himself. Oh, like I like to talk and get people to communicate. Joe High has the same skill.
Yeah, yeah.
So he should have been using it.
He's using it now. I don't know if you know active on Facebook like that.
Yeah, I know that he's done a lot of help for the community, and he tries to help kids. I know in his mom's name and some of the other people's name, they do a bike-a-thon, and so he's doing something. I think they do food.
Right.
And Tiger's always wanted to work with the kids, but I think it's kind of been stopped because of his history. But maybe it could be done and have someone who never has been involved or doesn't have a criminal history to supervise. Because those kids out there that are doing bad, they're not gonna listen to someone who hasn't came from the street. Because they figure they don't know. They just telling them that to tell them. But if they don't want Tiger to actually do just one-on-one then another man needs to get involved. And look, those boys need men in their life. mamas are trying to do the best they can, but they need men in their life. And so I think Tiger could do, if they're scared of his criminal history, then help him. I think you're involved in some organizations, maybe someone within your organization that helps kids could actually have supervise Tiger to make sure if they think he's like teaching a child the wrong thing. I don't think he's going to do that. But, and this is coming from someone that dealt with Tiger a lot. Anthony, I used to call him Anthony when I was mad at him. But do you think that that's a possibility?
Yeah, most definitely, because we had a few organizations back at home, particularly the D9, and like I said, I'm out there, so I actually see those two in particular, putting in work. You know what I mean? So it may not be the thing that people want to see. They probably want to see the kids in a different environment, but they're going to respect who they see on the streets. And those guys are in the streets putting in the work. So,
and if they know what they were into, they're more likely to grab that kid's attention and then switch it to something positive.
Right.
Oh, hold up, little brother. I'm not telling you Dylan Dope is not the thing, being involved in this life. Let's talk about another way, because this is the heartache I felt. It wasn't all cool, I've been robbed, I've been this, being in the penitentiary, what it's like. But they grab that attention from them, and then they can start talking about, hey, it's important, get a tutor if you need help in school, get involved in sports. Sports keeps you out of a lot of trouble. The more positive activity you're in, I can say that about a lot of kids that were in an environment that they had no positive role model. But if someone from the school, Mr. Perry saved a lot of Coach Perry saved a lot of kids' lives. So I think that's, in my opinion, that's a way that Tiger could help.
Roger that. So we're almost towards the end here.
Okay.
But let me ask you this, and then we're going to play a little word association to close it out. But I want to know this, and this is one I want to know, right? So if a police manual was followed to the T, would you consider Sabria Hill to be one of the cops who did it by the book, or would you say she was a dirty cop?
I did by the book. My integrity was so important. I never would cross the line. I don't believe in it. I would never get on a stand and lie. And I know cops that have done it. And if I knew, I told. And I'm not ashamed to say, if you do dirt in front of me, I'm telling someone. We have a higher standard. I'm not going to cross the line with evidence. If particular case, and I won't talk about the actual case, but there was a particular case that one of my officers did not properly follow the chain of custody on a key piece of evidence. I went straight to and then I found later on that they dated it and signed. I immediately went to the district attorney's office, and it was a serious case, but it was thrown out. But I'm not gonna ever, that's why I said my integrity is everything. When I retired, I held my head high. My mom worked. My father died. My father was an alcoholic, died at an early age. My mom married someone, and that's how I got to Louisiana when I was just a little bitty child. My mama worked super hard, and she instilled upon us hard work and your integrity. You can, when it's your time to walk to those gates, you should be able to know already that it's going to be open for you. And yeah, even if it costs a case, no way.
Roger that, fair enough. And before I get to the word association, I think this is important for me to say to the audience. When I started doing research, on you to do this interview, as I stated before, I think your integrity is intact. You know, some people may like you for various reasons. If you was a criminal, of course, you know, you're gonna feel a certain way towards you. And everybody I talk to, these are trustworthy people. They all said the same thing, damn near verbatim. Hey man, she was fair. I was out there doing what I was doing. She had a job to do, but she actually gave me warnings, and you know, you were cool with them. So that correlates to what you were saying. So your integrity is most definitely intact, my opinion. You know, and I can stand by that.
You told me that I was a gangster.
Yeah, oh yeah. They said, yeah, she's
Or I was the
she's
OG. I'm like, they're gonna have to give me a shirt made like that. Tell Joe hi, I want a shirt.
I will pass that message. So let's close this out with a little word association. I'm going to say some words, and
Okay.
you tell me what's the first thing that comes to your mind. All right. Jump Out Boys.
Me with the task force in a van. We had t-shirts. It was me with my long hair and the guys, the J-O-B, Jump Out Boys.
Mm-hmm.
But it was our J-O-B. That's how it started. It started in Morgan City, even though they related to the Pull and Warren days. That was way back. Started out, and we wore t-shirts with a van of us jumping out of this old raggedy van. But that's where the Jump Out Boys started.
All right. Next, Franklin PD.
Lost. I know that's a strong word, but I have to say that's what comes to my mind. Need help.
It is what it is. No pun intended. The next I have for you, marriage.
Important. Sacred. Life partners.
Last but not least, Miss Sabria Hill McGuire's police career.
Rewarding, but sad. I feel like I will carry the pain of so many people forever, but it was rewarding, and I'm glad I was there to carry that pain. My age that I am now, I know that I'll never stop carrying that pain, because it's been the years that it's been since I retired, and I still have